So today I want to go back over a bit of a tried and true topic of conversation that we have with people who might want to work with us, with our clients, just with consultants in general. And that's the notion of feast or famine. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're a consultant, you may immediately understand. But it's this notion of going through this, you know, ongoing cycle of I have lots of clients, I'm too busy, I don't know what to do, there's too much going on. My goodness, those jobs are done. Am I ever going to work again? Can I feed my family? And so on and so forth. And we talk about this a lot in terms of tactically how to resolve it. That's why we exist, right? We want to help consultants. We do help consultants find their way out of that feast or famine cycle into a place where they have, predictable, consistent business work and revenue. But what we haven't talked a lot about, I don't think on the podcast yet, is why this happens, right? How do you get into this? And how much control do you have over that cycle versus, as we often do, feeling that it's just something that happens to us? So that's where my brain is today. And I'm curious when I talk about that, what comes up for you?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. First of all, I think people really minimize the solution to this into something that's highly tactical and kind of pedestrian, to be honest. And the thinking is, well, if I could just find a way to generate some leads while I'm busy, right? If I could find a way to build pipeline while I'm busy, or if I could hire someone, the entire agency market is built on this premise, right? If I could just hire someone to generate some leads for me, agency or a part timer or someone like that, then I'd be off my plate, right? Because I can't do it. I can't do it when I'm busy. Just can't do it. So I need someone else to do it for me, or I need to, find some kind of, super automated AI system that just delivers leads because I can't do it when I'm busy. And I think the real problem is runs far deeper than that kind of tactical logistical thinking. I think when you look at this, for example, from a neuroscience perspective, yes, we're going to talk about neuroscience today, not because we're experts, but I think because it's important to understand, the human brain calls the shots here. The human brain's what determines when you feel like you're dipping below a certain threshold. It determines when you feel unsafe with your revenue, your income, etc. And what's the purpose of the human brain? To ensure survival, ultimately. Like that's what the thing is designed for. It's not designed for growth and for achievement and for pushing through, boundaries and achieving great success. It's designed for survival. So what happens is, neuroscientifically, when you're in the the feast part of the cycle, is you're feeling pretty good. You're feeling abundant, and you don't have the pressure, the insecurity, the survival risk that might motivate you to go out and start building pipeline. You should. It's risky, but your brain's not on high alert. Your brain's not signaling, oh, okay, we might hit some scarcity here until and unless something happens, right? And so the really common examples are I lose a whale client, or I read the writing on the wall. Like, this is why people come and talk to us, not because they're feasting and they know that the jig will be up eventually and they're planning ahead. No. More typically, it's because they lost the whale client, or there's been a really clear signal from a big client that things are going to turn eventually. And that's what signals to the brain that, oh, you know what? I better start preparing for what might be a famine.
Yeah. And I would just add to that. I think it's not that your brain isn't on high alert. It turns to being on high alert about something else, right? So when you're in the famine cycle, your brain is on high alert to find the next thing, right? To find the next client in this case. Once you have those clients, you're still in survival mode. It's just a different kind of survival, right? It's the kind where you don't want to lose the thing you have, where you want to be able to make sure that you can deliver what it is that you've promised, that you are not overworking yourself. Like all of those things come into play. So you're still, I think, in a heightened sense of arousal, looking out for something. It's just you shift to something else. And this is the challenge, right? And it's perfectly logical if we think about it, right? Humans used to live like that. You would gorge yourself on the food that you found in the particular time of year that it existed, or when you caught the big animal or whatever it is that happened. And then you would immediately slow down to preserve those resources. And it wasn't until the next thing came along or you got really hungry again that you worried about it again. So all that to say, it's normal. Often in this modern age, really are hard on ourselves because our brains are still functioning in a way that they've been trained to do for, thousands and thousands of years. And I guess what I'm saying is this isn't about deciding that there's something wrong with you because that's how you function. It's about being clear about it, understanding what's happening and why, and then figuring out, okay, what's the path to a way of thinking that puts you in a better position.
And I think let's normalize it to a certain extent, and I think we'll talk about some strategies to overcome feast or famine today, but to a certain extent, it's inevitable. There is a level of, at times you will be doing more revenue, and at times you'll have less revenue. There will be, depending on the nature of your business, there will be a quarter to quarter fluctuation. There will be maybe year to year fluctuation, and that's normal. Can be mitigated. The curve can be flattened out, but also somewhat inevitable. So I think, for folks who are feeling like, is it going to be this way forever? I'm kind of here to validate to an extent, yes, you can do some things to flatten out the curve. We'll talk about that today, but to an extent, yes. And I got to say, that's a hard lesson that I learned in this business. Carrie may recall, like, there was a point at which I thought and I believe that every single month revenue goes up and to the right. Every month. And when it doesn't go up and to the right, and when it dips, well, what's going on? What are we doing wrong? Right? Or when there's a bad quarter, like we've all of a sudden we failed, right? Burn everything down to the ground.
Yeah.
Let's rebuild it. What the heck? Well, no, despite the efforts that we take to build pipeline, and we're quite prolific at it, there's some natural ebbs and flows in the market. There's some natural ups and downs. There's a natural rhythm, and you're not going to perfectly mitigate that no matter how good you are.
Yeah, there's really two things to consider when we talk about mitigation. One is, shrinking that wave, right? Making it shallower. The other is just raising the baseline, because it's one thing to have your revenue go up and down and up and down when the down is still at a level at which you can function and pay your bills and, be perfectly happy. And quite frankly, there's something, if you think about it differently, a little bit exciting about that, right? What we don't want to do is completely remove the ability for the upside either. What we want to do is raise that floor so that you're not living in that sense of actual famine, right? Of desperation.
I think you nailed it, right? Like, at the end of the day, what we signed up for as entrepreneurs is higher returns. Like we signed up for a level of risk, right? If you look up the Merriam-Webster definition of entrepreneur, which I don't have in front of me, but it reads something like an entrepreneur is somebody who trades in risk. So it's kind of funny, and I guilty as charged, right? Like many of us go into entrepreneurship thinking it's going to be steady state. Well, that's what employment was like. Employment, you traded off stability for gain, right? You traded away risk for a level of stability. As entrepreneurs now, you don't want stability necessarily. And Carrie's point is critical. Like, you want your floor to be raised, but you don't want stability. You want fluctuation upwards, right? You want spikes. You want growth. As long as, to your point, and I think that's really critical way to think about it, as long as your floor remains above your needs, then you welcome the fluctuation, as long as it's providing you with more resources.
So let's talk about how we do it.
I mean, a number of things come to mind, and so I'm not quite sure where the best place is to start. But the first thing that comes to mind is there's no right time to solve this problem. There's no because on the one hand, we talk to people who are in the middle of the feast cycle, and they go, "Well, we're busy, and they know they should do it, but they've convinced themselves that they're too busy to do it, and they realize that it's better to do it from a position of strength, right? To figure out how to build pipeline, have a strategy, work in your positioning, and what is the work? The work is fix your positioning, build systems to generate pipeline. It's work. In our estimation, it's 3 to 6 months worth of work, right? Not like 40 hours a week type of work, but steady work. As long as you're following a certain program or system that's proven to generate that outcome. And so there's no perfect time. If you're in the middle of a feast cycle, and eventually the jig is going to be up, and no client stays forever, it's probably a good time to do it now. Find the time, right? And if you're in the middle of a famine cycle, well, you have the time, and that's where it becomes difficult to kind of spend the resources in getting help, getting consulting, getting training, and so on and so forth. Investing now in the middle of a famine cycle will enable you to avoid the fluctuations that you're experiencing in the future, right? And so the first thing is there's no perfect time. The moment you realize you need to do this is the moment that you need to capitalize on it and not let your brain talk you out of this being the perfect time, because there is no perfect.
Yeah, and I would say that sort of leads, if I work backwards from that, what really has to happen, and this is the conversation that we have so often, is the true sort of acceptance that that's not the cycle you want to live in, right? That it's not going to work for you. Not just that you don't want to, that it's not good for you or your business. Like living in that feast or famine cycle means that you're making decisions from a place of lack, right? You're making decisions that are not necessarily going to push things forward because you are making decisions from behind the eight ball. You're running to catch up half of the time. And so what I would encourage everyone who's listening to this to do is truly self-reflect a little bit and question, have I just decided that this is how it is? Right? Have I taken on this story that feast or famine is the way it works in entrepreneurship? And I guess it's going to, I'm going to get that dopamine hit every time I close a new deal, and that's going to be great. And then I'm going to be traumatized every time those client relationships end and I have to start over. And is there something in that that's, in maybe a sick way working for me? Right? Is it something that I've kind of grabbed onto and I'm, weirdly enjoying, or I see how unhealthy it is? Like, where are you right now in how you think about this notion of feast or famine? Because you're only going to be able to do something about it when you decide that you can have some control over it. And so often the conversations we have are because the consultants we're talking to don't feel they have any control, right? It's all about just what comes to me. It's the market. It's, everything that's happening around me.
So you went there, and now we got to go there. Okay. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. First, I got to give credit to one of our clients. His name's Ian. Ian, if you're listening, this is you. Ian said to me when he first enrolled in the program, 90-day pipeline, he said, look, when I first started consulting, everyone told me consulting's great. But boy, that revenue roller coaster, that's a thing. It's feast or famine. It's up and down. It's up and down. He said, I refuse to believe that that's the way it has to be. And I get that they're experiencing that, and perhaps that's true for them, but I personally want to do what I need to do to avoid that. I believe that this is a solvable problem, and I want to solve that problem. That's why he started working with us. So kudos to him and others. Like, there are people who believe that this is a solvable problem and are solving it. And if you're one of the ones who's not solving it, trust me, you have peers who are addressing this, solving it, and are better off because of it. They've raised their floor. There's still some fluctuation, but they're overall doing better, making more money, and are less susceptible to the ebbs and flows of the market. Okay. You said something that really bears further emphasis, that there is a payoff to your current circumstances. Whether you realize it or not, you're getting something out of the way things are right now. And the question that's worth asking, and I'm kind of repeating what Carrie just said for the sake of emphasis, the question that's worth asking is, what am I getting out of this? What am I validating here? We love to be right. The brain loves to be right. The brain loves to validate itself. So what validation are you getting from your current circumstances? Well, I knew this is how consulting would be. Some of Ian's peers, for example, they said, oh, this is how it's going to be. And then they went into it, and this is how it was. See, I knew it. It's going to be a roller coaster, feast or famine, right? And then when Ian finds a way out of that revenue roller coaster and avoids a feast or famine, they'll find reasons as to why that's true for Ian, but can't be true for them. Well, Ian's unique and Ian's market and Ian's offer, but for me, no, this is how it is because that's how I expected it to be. So there's some validation going on there that you need to investigate. What are you validating? What kind of payoff are you receiving from your current circumstances? And the second thing I want to mention here is everyone's got a number. Everyone's got what I call an income thermostat, right? So like in my house, like it's like I like to keep it at about 73 degrees, okay, in the winter. But that's downstairs. It's never quite that warm upstairs, right? You're thinking that's too warm?
That's warm.
Yeah. So that's downstairs. Upstairs, it's in the winter, it's never quite that warm. But 73 is like, that's where I like it. If it's 72, I feel it at night. If it's 74, I feel like it's gotta be 73. Income's very similar. We all have a number. And when we go above that number, triggers feast, feeling good. This is great. But also maybe too much. Can I handle it? Now I'm overwhelmed. How many commitments have I made? Is this going to crash and burn? Am I going to be exposed? Do I deserve this? Am I worthy of this? Oh my God, who am I now? Right? Panic. And when it dips below that number, another type of panic. Can I pay the bills? Am I a hack? Am I unsuccessful? Have I failed? Can I sustain this? Right? And the thing to reflect on here is, where did that number come from? What do you think? Where did that number come from?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it comes from a few places. Often it's the amount you used to make when you had a job, right? I also think there is it's kind of fascinating to me. There's history behind it, right? When I was young, the rich families made this, right? Or, a good income was this. And I don't even think we necessarily adjust up for, inflation and all of those other things over time, right? Somewhere in your past, a number has glommed itself into your brain. And it's really hard to let go of it. So, yeah, and it's interesting because I also don't think it's always the number that you would say out loud, right? If I asked you what your number was, it's quite possible you would give me a number significantly higher than the one that's actually driving your behavior.
Which is wild, right? Like
Yeah.
this number, if we're all being honest with ourselves, we have a number, and this number is responsible for a lot of the emotions we feel around how much money we're making, feast, famine, etc., on both sides. And the question is, have you actually sat down deliberately and thought through what that number should be? Or are we just inheriting a number, either
Yeah.
based on our upbringing, what our parents used to make, what we made in a job, or if we've been consulting for a number of years, what we have typically made as a consultant? When you think about it, none of that data should have any actual bearing on what you could be commanding in the marketplace. But that's where we set our thermostat. So what do you do? Crank up the heat?
Exactly.
Get used to 75, 76.
Gosh.
But yeah, I mean, to an extent, yeah, that is, look, like personal story, okay? I tell the story to clients all the time. When I first left employment, it was 10, 12 years ago, give or take. I don't even know the number. My goal, like most people, was I want to replace my income. It's very natural. It's a dumb goal. Don't get me wrong. It's very dumb, right? But I'm guilty as charged. I was dumb, right? It's also human nature for that to be the goal in the beginning. And so I wanted to make, $100 to $120,000 a year back then, right? That was kind of the number. That's a little bit more money than maybe I was making in corporate, but adjusted for risk, etc. And so guess what I made the first 5 years in business? But 100, 120. Like I think there was a year where I hit 150, but nothing terribly. And when I hit 150, I thought, oh, well, I don't belong here. This isn't like, I'm now just completely out of control, money hungry, greedy, whatever, right? Like this can't be right. And then I dipped back down to 120. Now, what happened? Did the market just happen to send me the perfect amount of demand? And I just happened to price my projects exactly the right way and happen to structure my time and my availability and capacity exactly the right way to deliver on about $100,000, $120,000 a year? Or did I just decide that's how it was going to be? And that's how it was. So probably a longer discussion to be had and not for today. But one of the decisions here is just decide it's going to be different. The number is different. Your number is higher. Your number is higher. You raise the floor. You become uncomfortable with anything less than that higher number. And that forces you to engage. That forces you to have some urgency. That forces you to get creative, industrious when you're not delivering on that higher number.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say sort of the second broad stroke piece around this is really internalizing that business development is part of the work that you're here to do. So often we're having conversations with people who feel and justify that, my job is to deliver the solution, right? My job is to be the consultant. And completely miss the part that in order to be the consultant, right, in order to have the problem to solve, you've got to be able to find the clients and work with the people, right? And so often this takes the shape of, well, I don't have time, right? I'm busy delivering, so I don't have time for business development. And what I will say to you is the work that you need to do in delivery quite likely will fit within the amount of time you give it, right? If you said if you only had 2 days a week because something completely beyond your control was happening, you had 2 days a week, you had to deliver a solution, you would find a way to do it. If you give yourself 5 days, you will find a way to have it fill 5 days a week. And if you decide that you can work every night and every weekend, I can guarantee you that the work you're doing will fill that time as well, right? Parkinson's law, the work will expand to fill the time that you give it. And so when you can get to a place where you've internalized that business development is part of the plan, right? It's a thing that you need to do. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not going to mean that you can't deliver on the work that you have committed to. And so, the real question here, and I think this is a point to talk about a little bit, is how do you get to that place where you have truly accepted that your job is not just to be the consultant, that in order to be a consultant, you do need to have clients.
Go through a sufficient amount of pain before you come to the realization. I mean, I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I know.
I got to tell you, I think that's kind of it. Like people that we talk to, it's they come to the realization when they've been beaten up enough and they've been through enough of the feast or famine cycles to conclude that they can't sustain that anymore. They need to make a change. And then they come to the realization that, oh, okay, my job here is not just to deliver work, it's to actually bring in the work too. And I have two jobs. Do some people come out of the gate a little more entrepreneurial minded? Because this is what this is. This is an entrepreneurial mindset
Mhm.
that we're
Yeah.
talking about, right? Joe the dry cleaner, when he's busy, with customers and doing dry cleaning work, doesn't, stop running advertising, doesn't stop running the billboard, doesn't stop, talking to, networking and referrals with the tailor and the whoever else, right? Like I'm using Joe the dry cleaner as an example because Joe the dry cleaner he's not a dry cleaner. He's an entrepreneur. He's a business owner. And for some reason, consultants fail to see themselves as business owners, entrepreneurs. Yes, your service is a consulting service. Yes, you solve problems. That's not what you are. You're an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, your job is to bring in the business first and foremost, and then deliver on the business. And I think people come in different, different shades of entrepreneurial thinking. Some people have more of it coming in and they get this easier. Some people have to learn it the hard way, but that's fine as long as you learn it in time.